Let's talk about building capacity in a PLC through planning for learning. We will review our learning platform and planning for learning protocols in this quick video. So what is our goal in Birdville? Let's remember that our goal is all about helping our students walk out of this system as empowered learners, responsible citizens, global competitors, and innovative entrepreneurs. In order to do this, we have said as a district that our vision is to create the learning platform for every child in every classroom. And our learning platform represents the kind of learning we need to see and the kind of systems of support we need as part of our organization to ensure every child can reach that vision we have for them. So we want to help our students master the standards for their learning through a student-centered, cognitive, and interactive approach to learning. In order to do this, we have to have clear learning expectations for our students and connect those to the kind of tasks they're doing and the products that they're creating. We have to use best practice strategies and structures and provide feedback on that student performance along the way to ensure continuous improvement and growth of their skills. To help our teachers do this, we have to ensure that we have quality professional learning that is married with coaching, reflection, and mentoring so that our teachers have the consistent support and follow-up they need to continue to advance their practice toward the learning platform. So how must we transform our instruction to achieve this vision that we have? In Birdville ISD, we launched a rubric along with our learning platform to help teachers and campuses measure their progress toward that new vision of learning. So there is a rubric for each piece of our learning platform, from the communication of standards to the student understanding of the learning expectations. And you'll notice in each rubric, level 1 moves from very teacher-centered behaviors over to that new vision where we have fully student-centered, cognitive, and interactive classrooms. We have a rubric for the tasks and work products and the feedback based upon student performance, as well as student self-evaluation. And embedded in all of these rubrics are those kinds of best practice strategies and structures required to move students through this kind of learning. So, in thinking about how we coach our teachers and help them continually to grow their practice, let's think about what we have control over. There's multiple dimensions of data. There's so many things that impact what happens in our classrooms and our schools. And sometimes we can get bogged down with feeling like we don't have any power over changing demographics or the students in our classrooms or the perceptions out there. What we do have control over completely is our processes. So while we can't control many of those variables, we can control our processes, which play a hugely important role in determining the productivity of our organization. So can we have input into our system? We want to serve every child that we get in. We know we have to do that in the reality that we're given in the state of Texas. So can we put in some processes that can ensure that when our students leave the system, the output that we are creating is what we want? If we have consistent processes, that's how we develop a high-performing culture. It's through those processes that we design, implement, support, and continue to help our teachers and other employees across the district implement so that eventually we have a high-performing culture. Having these processes helps establish pathways that make things that are more abstract, such as planning for really deep learning. Can we make that more concrete? Provide consistency so that we can reduce the random outcomes across the district and create measurable, comparable data. The role of the leader within process improvement and implementation is to stress the importance of each step in a process. So in a moment, we'll start looking at some processes we've put into place to help teachers create that learning platform for their students. Each step in that process is a piece of the puzzle that can't be left behind. We have to intentionally be implementing, studying, taking action to continually improve the processes in our system. And the support for developing automaticity in these processes is what's essential. They don't really create that high-performing culture until everyone has truly adopted them into their behaviors and the ways they think about designing learning for schools. This helps us move from thinking about accountability to responsibility. How can I move from more working in a compliance mode to I want to really own and tackle these processes so that I can be responsible to the students in my classroom. The reason this has all come up and why we need such strong processes to help our teachers at this time in education is because we're making shifts from planning for teaching to planning for learning. The kinds of shifts that move us from just selecting topics we'll teach, planning a lesson, and then creating an assessment over all of that. Now we're trying to start with our standards and really unpack them, clarify what those standards are asking for, thinking about how will students have to demonstrate evidence of their learning? What kind of tasks and work would they need to do to help them master that learning? What kind of strategies and structures do we as educators need to put into place to move them through that learning? What resources do we have that are aligned to this? How can we differentiate for all of our learners? That work is much more complex than the work of planning for teaching. In planning for teaching, we could divide and conquer in our approach to planning. But in planning for learning, it's essential that we take a collaborative approach to planning so that all teachers deeply understand the lessons and the purposes behind all the design choices so that they can be prepared to monitor and adjust in the moment in response to student needs. When we plan for teaching, we end up not necessarily being aligned to standards. It's very topically driven. But when we backward design, we're ensuring every step of the way that the lessons we're designing are tightly aligned to leading our students toward mastery. In planning for teaching, the behaviors are much more focused on what the teacher needs to do and what needs to occur. Whereas in planning for learning, we're focused on the student learning and the experiences they need in order to be able to demonstrate mastery of that desired learning. So all of this work is much more complex, and it asks our teachers to become true designers of learning. That's very abstract to be able to do this for every student in our classroom, so that is why we need processes. So we have some planning for learning protocols, and the goals of these protocols is simply we need to elevate the cognitive discourse within our PLCs through the use of our protocols for planning, using data, and reflecting on practice, so that the thinking represented in those protocols eventually becomes automatic for our teachers, and we have PLCs that can produce high-quality, standards-based lessons focused on student learning. So the purpose of these protocols, again, is to elevate that cognitive discourse within PLCs. We have to think and discuss at very, very high levels to be able to truly plan for learning that is tightly aligned to standards and student needs. So our protocols are there to be thinking and discussion guides that move us through that complex act of planning within our PLCs. They are not at all assignments to be completed. In fact, it is kind of counterproductive to the process to attempt to write an answer to all of the guiding questions. It's truly a thinking and discussion guide that moves our brains through the backward design process. Protocols are not a PLC agenda. On a PLC agenda, we might say that we will be planning together today. When we're planning, we bring out those protocols as resources to help us plan. So to kind of set up an analogy of what the purpose of the protocols are, let's watch a quick video. So do we want our teachers to feel like this when they're planning the bumper cars? There's really no clear end goal. We're just kind of bopping around, not really certain what we're trying to accomplish. Versus on the right-hand side, you see an experience that allows for freedom. I can move to the left or to the right, but I have a track that's keeping me on course. We want our teachers to feel like they have a destination, they know where they're going, but yet maintain the freedom to truly be able to design for their student learning. So our protocols are all about providing a path for our PLCs to be able to do this complex work. To support this, we have our learning platform website at birdvilleschools.net/learning, where we have our learning platform along with a glossary that explains every term used, our learning expectations rubric, all of our protocols. So let's talk briefly through each of our protocols. First, we have our unit protocol, which is all about looking at the unit ahead, all of the pieces within it are within our overviews, the vocab, resources, all of the standards within our units, looking at test specification documents if necessary, really analyzing what are those process skills we need kids to master as they move through their learning. And then looking at the calendar, okay, we've got this amount of time to actually tackle and help our students master all of this learning. So now let's make our plan for the unit. Which unit standards will be our leading standards? We can't teach every standard in isolation. We've got to think about how will we bundle and kind of attack these standards throughout this unit. What skills can we partner together to bundle for a maximization of learning? For each leading standard, what process skills need to be explicitly addressed in order for students to achieve mastery? And it gives teachers a space to plot out how they will tackle those standards throughout the unit. Our lesson protocol really moves teachers through guiding questions through this act of thinking here. So let me talk you through what this diagram represents. Our protocol asks teachers to start by looking at the standards for the day or for the lesson that they're planning and think about what is that leading standard. What standards are partnered up with that to help support that leading standard? What process skills support this leading standard? And then looking at those standard clarification documents, thinking about what is the cognitive rigor of these standards in isolation, and then what happens when we're bringing them together in the way that we've chosen. What rigor do we really need to see? What level of thinking should we be seeing with our students to help them achieve this learning? And then looking at the other standards that we've got, how can we help our students learn these skills in an effort to truly support that leading standard? And what does that look like when we combine all these standards together in a student learning experience? What would the evidence of their learning be? Ultimately, how would they have to demonstrate this learning on a test if there is a high-stakes test associated with these standards in this course? How are we going to formatively assess their learning along the way so that we can measure progress and keep them moving toward mastery? We need to know what's really expected of them and what they'll have to show us with that learning before we ever start thinking about a lesson. So next we think about what are the student tasks? What would they actually need to do in order to engage in that content within that certain context using that level of thinking and rigor? What are those tasks we would need our kids to do? Once you've figured that out and you've reached the top of this circle, you're ready to dive in and design a lesson. You're ready to think about what are those strategies and structures that I as a teacher can put into place to support my students' abilities to do these tasks. What resources are aligned with this learning? What can I use to help move students through it? And then now I'm ready to go to what we typically think of as a lesson plan. How's this going to unfold? What is the procedure of this lesson? What kind of accommodations, modifications, extensions, truly what kind of differentiation will I need to ensure that all of my students can move through these tasks, ultimately being able to demonstrate evidence of their learning about these standards? And in order to do this, I have to engage in continual reflection around how the students are doing, how their tasks and the strategies I'm putting into place are working out so that I can keep them moving towards mastery. Once students have demonstrated evidence of their learning, I can now analyze that data through either a CBA analysis or it could be any kind of assessment. But I want to start with what items, whether that's multiple choice or more authentic open-ended, what standards were really at play there? What skills were we asking kids to demonstrate? And what is the content, context, and cognitive rigor that was being asked of the students in that particular item, question, work product? Looking at their performance, what trends do we see? How can we move forward from here and reflect on that instruction so that we're again informing what our students are doing to learn so that the next time they demonstrate evidence of their learning, we can once again see how they did, what was being asked of them, what trends do we see, how can we reflect on that? So it's a cyclical process to help us be more data informed as we plan our instruction. And the final planning for learning protocol is to enable us to reflect as a team after instruction has occurred. We have so many factors that impact the output that we get. sometimes we forget about all the potential factors involved and could really miss out on some opportunities to better be informed about how to help our students. We need to really look. Did we implement the curriculum fully? What were the standards, goals, and objectives? Is there something not quite right with the sequence that we went through with our curriculum? What resources did we use? How did those impact what we ended up seeing with our students' performance? What about our students themselves? What are the factors that are affecting our students that, again, had an effect on the output that we see in this unit? What methods and strategies did we use, and how did we organize those within the structures, policies, and procedures in our classrooms? And how did we as teachers provide engaging and high-quality work throughout this unit? We really want to think about all of these factors and how they influence the assessment and the student performance that we see at the end of a unit. The expected outcomes from our Planning for Learning protocols are primarily student learning. Through the act of us all coming together as a PLC, as a team, engaging in this cognitive discourse, moving through this backward design process, we should have an impact on the student learning we're seeing in our classrooms and the practice that we're putting into place in our classrooms to make that happen. A more tangible result of our Planning for Learning protocol would be our lesson plans themselves. There's no need to fill out the protocol. It's helping prime our brains and help us make decisions in our lesson plans. It should result in an agreement upon strategies and best practices as we are implementing, reflecting together, and finding those things that are making a positive impact on our students, which ultimately leads us to accuracy and precision in our instructional delivery. As a team, we're continuously improving and giving our students the best of what we know to do for them each day. So that eventually with our protocols, we want to end up like this driver here. This driver no longer needs a track. This driver is on a very difficult course. Doesn't need to bust out a protocol to tell them how to turn that wheel. This driver has truly internalized what he needs to do or she needs to do to stay safely on the road. And we want our teachers to feel like this with the act of planning for learning. As a result of using the protocols consistently, they should become automatic and be able to masterfully move through that kind of work, as you see this driver here. So it's really all about a process. What processes can we put into place for our teachers and our teams to help ensure that our learning platform is not just a pretty poster on the wall, but is truly indicative of the student experiences occurring in all of our classrooms? So the more consistently we can move through this protocol, the more we as an entire system of Birdville ISD can develop that automaticity to focus on the student learning in our classrooms. I've seen that there's no more powerful way to initiate significant change than to convene a conversation. Protocols are our conversation guides. The protocols are our processes that we can use as a system to overcome all the other factors that we don't have control over and ensure that our students learn at the highest possible levels.